Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. So, something surprising is happening that I don't hear many talk about. Not just the BYD financials might not be as good as they make them look like, but the legacy automakers in the US have basically given up on the affordable car, leaving a huge addressable market up for grabs. And the only one that is basically going to have access to that market in the next few years is Tesla. Not the Chinese, not the Japanese, and the Americans has completely given up on that market, so we have only Tesla left. That war for the affordable car in the US is without any real competition, because Ford, GM and Stellantis have all priced themselves out of the market, and their dealerships are getting swamped. And Stellantis has shown us how fast this can go from all-time high to be cut in half in just 6 months. So 2025 is looking to be the year the legacy automakers will fall even further, and Tesla will bring you the affordable car back to the US. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So Michael Dunn, who is a former GM executive and a China expert, has made an article explaining that yes, BYD is good, but they are not invincible. As he wrote, so damn good, but not invincible. Not a lot of people talk about it, but Warren Buffett has been aggressively shedding his BYD holdings. Since late 2022, Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has reduced its ownership in BYD by more than half. Those sales are shares it had owned since its preceding investment way back in 2008. Berkshire now owns less than 5% of BYD. Now here's the strange part. Warren has been selling shares at a time when BYD is hitting full stride, growing faster than any other automaker in the history of cars. BYD delivered up to 10x since 2020, from 400,000 to more than 4 million vehicles. Now, suddenly BYD is bigger than Ford and Honda and Nissan. Investors, not named Warren Buffett, are entranced. BYD is now worth more than $105 billion. That makes BYD the third most valuable automaker in the world after Tesla and Toyota. Okay, perhaps Warren Buffett is just taking profits being smart. Or maybe, just maybe, the Oracle of Omaha sense something that everyone else is missing. What might that something look like? The reality is that competitors today generally respect and fear BYD. After a visit to BYD headquarters in 2023, Toyota's EV head, Takeru Kato, came back to Japan and announced, "We are in trouble." Ford CEO Jim Farley recently called BYD products an existential threat for Ford's business. I'm not going deeper into why BYD is a threat. You can watch my Carmageddon video if you want to learn more, but let's take a closer look at some of the potential cracks in the BYD business that Dune is talking about here. According to J.D. Power's China's 2024 IQS study, the BYD Seal and the BYD Song Plus finished at or near the bottom in quality rankings. Manufacturing executives in the industry tells me it is next to impossible to increase output 10x in 4 years and not have quality issues. Yes, that will always be the case, but the Chinese are also willing to put cars on the market that are not perfect so they don't sacrifice their volume and gaining market share, as CNBC also explained in their documentation of why Americans' cars are so expensive.
These companies have an intense overtime culture.
Most of them do not allow this drift that Western companies do. And they're willing to put a bad vehicle out there and suffer the consequences because they consider the alternative to be a guaranteed loss. If I take 40 months to make the vehicle, I can't make a competitive vehicle.
They're also willing to endure large losses early as they get to scale. There are two benefits: higher volumes, which help spread costs, but also a lot of learning in that painful early period.
This desire for short-term profits by American investors, these activist investors, makes that strategy hard. China has taken large losses for a long time. And this is their playbook. They do this in industry after industry.
So the Chinese are willing to take a loss here and now and put cars on the road that they are willing to get complaints about to make sure they get more market share. But we have also seen BYD having trouble in Brazil with temporary shutdown of BYD's operations. A total of 163 of those workers at a construction company hired by BYD were found to be working in what Brazilian authorities said were slavery-like conditions. And they also in a trade war with the US, they screw over their dealerships in many countries, and they are ramping up a very complex brand portfolio with many different models. And as I talked about in my news show, Bloomberg reported last week that BYD's debt may be larger than it appears. However, it's structured. It's clearly a form of hidden debt. BYD is shooting sleight of hand to present these liability as part of working capital, says Nigel Stevenson of GMT Research in Hong Kong. BYD took an average of 275 days to pay their suppliers in 2023. And don't forget, they also asked their suppliers to cut price by 10% in 2025. So it's not all roses for BYD. So all of these issues, of course, may be manageable. BYD has enough employees, nearly 1 million in total, to power through these growing pains. But there is one more danger lurking in the horizon, as Michael wrote, and it's a big one. The US and China are engaged in an intense battle for supremacy over the next generation technologies. BYD, fairly or not, is seen as the tip of the CCP spear when it comes to EVs and batteries. Warren Buffett, more than anyone, would understand this risk. In 2023, Buffett sold every last one of his shares in TSMC, the world's largest and most profitable chip maker, headquartered in Taiwan. When asked about the thinking behind the move, Buffett was succinct: "I don't like its location." Warren might know a thing or two. So yes, BYD might look big and strong, but as I've said many times before, they're still not really earning big money on EVs. So compared to someone like Tesla, they are not as good as a business case as they are, as Tesla is earning money on their EVs and already have factories in the US, Europe and China. So Tesla stands to become an even bigger player in the affordable car market in the US, as there is basically no competitors left in the US. And BYD is not coming anytime soon because of tariffs, and the Japanese don't offer great affordable EVs. This is all up for grabs for Tesla. Like CNBC also shared in their video about the expensive US cars, that in 2019 in the US there were 27 models that cost $25,000 or less. But in September 2024, there were only 6 models left at that price, and 0 cars for $20,000 or less. So if Tesla can actually make an EV for about $32,500 with the $7,500 tax credit, they could hit that $25,000 mark, where Tesla would only be fighting against 6 other models. This could be a blockbuster of a car for Tesla if they are able to do this. And I think they are. As Tesla's Model 3, we know that the average cost for Tesla to produce that car is $35,000. And with some of the new technologies from their unboxed production method, and making the car just smaller and more affordable by simply not putting in the expensive stuff like ventilated seats, screen in the back, automatic trunk, and so on, I think Tesla would pretty easily make a car that cost Tesla maybe about $20,000 or $25,000 to produce. And if it cost Tesla about $25,000 to build in the beginning, and they sold it for $32,500, Tesla would still earn about 23% gross margin on those cars, better than BMW. And the customer would get a very nice EV for only $25,000, as long as the tax credit stays, of course. And I know the Americans like their huge cars, but if Tesla actually brings an affordable EV that still has great software, great safety assist feature, and full self-driving version 13, I think many that actually don't need these huge vans or SUVs will probably go for such a car, as the average car price in the US is getting close to $50,000. If you can get a very nice little EV for half the price of the average car in the US, I think many Americans would also go for a car like that, as we are also hearing from the dealerships.
But profits come at the cost of increasingly alienated customers.
Automakers meet with their dealerships on a regular basis, and particularly they do this every January at one specific gathering. And the news that came out of that gathering last year was dealerships were saying, please send us more things that we can profitably sell for less. I guess that's the message they're getting from people walking in the door.
And because the old legacy automakers dealerships inventory is piling up, they are in some serious trouble as they need to make some huge discounts to get rid of all that inventory. They will probably lose a lot of money selling their very expensive vans and SUVs, and they have completely given up on the affordable market.
Americans are paying more for nearly everything than they were a few years ago, but car prices have outpaced even inflation. They're off pandemic-era highs, but not by a lot.
And I shopped around quite a bit. Before I was driving a Toyota Highlander, and the prices had went up a lot, and it was not all electric, and I wanted to move to something more environmentally friendly, so I went with the Tesla.
So that is basically up for grab for Tesla, as the Japanese don't really offer any EVs, and the EVs they do offer is mostly expensive SUVs. So the Japanese are not going for the market they once entered the US market with, small, affordable models. And the Chinese are not yet in the US, so Tesla does have time to get their affordable model off the ground that they're coming with this year and grab that market the others have given up on. So instead of being up against the expensive cars with a sticker price of $65,000 or more, where there are 110 models to choose from in the US in 2024, Tesla will enter a market where the competition is only about 6 models. But the addressable market is maybe something like 5 to 7 times bigger. And with the software you get with your Tesla, a Tesla compact model will be in a league of its own against those 6 other models. Tesla could become the king of the affordable market in the US. As we know, the others can't compete in affordable EVs, as Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, has already told us. They will not be able to make a $30,000 to $40,000 EV profitable this decade. So GM will not be a competitor for Tesla's $25,000 to $32,000 EV for at least another 5 years. And the Chinese, like BYD, is not really coming into the country over the next few years because of tariffs, before they can build some factories in the country. And the Japanese are nowhere near coming with affordable EVs in high volume in the near future. So Tesla will probably have this market basically to themselves for the next few years. And GM and Ford are going for profits over volume to get some short-term gains for their investors, but that could end up being a very big disadvantage and leaving more market share for someone like Tesla.
You're selling directly to people who want a lot of bells and whistles, and so there isn't a lot of direct targeting of people who would want a small, cheap car. This might be a strategic mistake.
Second factor, priorities changed.
The legacy automakers in the US have been pretty explicit about, we are going for profits, we are not going for volume. And so we are going to sacrifice volume if it gives us a bigger margin. And that's a different strategy than they've followed in the past.
GM has become known for this strategy, especially under current CEO Mary Barra. Fiat Chrysler, now Stellantis, was very early to cutting high volume but low profit vehicles like sedans. In 2023, profits at GM and Ford were the highest in at least a decade, and Stellantis reported a record. Many global automakers have enjoyed similar gains.
General Motors, for example, has these activist investors sitting on their board, and if they don't buy back billions of dollars worth of stock, Mary Barra could be out of a job. And so it forces a more short-term calculation than she might want.
Remember, the story has been, for much of the last 6 months, you either cut price or you cut volume. And they've decided they're not cutting price.
And the funny thing is that LFP batteries was actually invented in the US, but because of shifting policies and low prices on gas, that company went bankrupt and was bought cheaply by the Chinese that figured out how to scale up LFP batteries. And that has now become the biggest volume battery for EVs in the world, also leaving the Western automakers high and dry as they made the bet on the more energy-dense battery with lithium-ion batteries. So they are now sitting with the more expensive batteries than the Chinese and Tesla that has also been using LFP batteries for some years now. And more than 50% of Tesla's cars are standard range cars that only use LFP batteries. And another great thing about that is that LFP batteries is cobalt free. So the big boys have been sleeping in the class of EVs, and they have priced themselves out of the market by going for profits over volume, making their cars very, very expensive. But as they still only earn about 5 to 10% on their ICE cars, there is not a lot of room to play with. And that is why we can see them crumble in a matter of months, as we saw with Stellantis. Stellantis had a great year in 2023 with record high revenue and profits, but 6 months later they were struggling. And Stellantis saw their profits drop by 50% in 2024 in the US. They got cut in half in 6 months. So we can see just how quick it can turn around, as they only have one horse in the race, their big expensive one. And most of them are ICE versions that are going out of business. So in 2024, we had no talk from Stellantis about EV strategies or anything else but how do we get rid of inventory at their dealership lots. And we are seeing the same thing happening with GM. Their dealer lots are also bloated and have grown from 200,000 units in inventory in Q4 2021 to 627,000 units in inventory in Q3 2024. And the same thing goes for Ford. Just listen to Brandon here from Car Question Answered, who is a used car dealer himself, about the inventory problem he sees at the Ford dealerships.
All right, today I'm at Ford because they have a massive problem. They have inventory stacked absolutely everywhere. So I get it, Mr. Ford salesman down in the comments. I know you're wanting to think Ford is doing so great. Sales are up, right? Well, their stockholders would beg to differ. The workers that got laid off, they would beg to differ. And I can go ahead and tell you, this dealership right here that I'm walking on, they would beg to differ. So I'm missing something somewhere because all of this, it doesn't line up. And here's the thing that was supposed to be back ordered and tons of customers that were waiting to get one. And now they're sitting everywhere. Now they've cut production. Now they've cost people their jobs. This is an F-150 Platinum.
So the old guys have kind of backed themselves up in a corner with no way out, but to innovate and change the whole way they do business. And start making software-defined vehicles, learn how to create software in-house, become a software company suddenly. So the old legacy automakers have a long way to go to keep up with the likes of Tesla and the Chinese like BYD. And don't seem to want to try to fight them off, but just give them the affordable market, just like they did with the Japanese back in the 70s. In China, it's a different story. But as we have just seen, BYD is not really a nice profitable machine. They are still spending a lot of money just to take market share and hope profit will come after they have outcompeted the legacy automakers, as we have seen the Chinese do in so many other industries like batteries and smartphones and more. But Tesla will be profitable on their affordable EVs and will therefore be the real competition to BYD's affordable EVs in the same price range in China. And Tesla will enter a whole new market in China as well, making their addressable market grow significantly. But in the US, Tesla will basically have the affordable car market for themselves, as the old legacy automakers don't know how to make affordable cars anymore. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.